For now.
All right.
All right. Welcome to this week's installment of Corn Belt Umpires Association weekly Zoom clinics. Today we're going to talk about managing the game. There's a lot that goes into this, so I expect this to be a multi-point or multi-segment series. I'm just trying to find ways to help you be more efficient with pace of play, with handling situations, and kind of expectations that make up the complete package of a good umpire. So that we'll get started. As always, rules and expectations. Please leave your microphone muted until you're ready to ask a question. If you have comments or additions to a certain topic, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll address those as necessary. And then if you have questions, my email's up there. Reach out to myself, reach out to Jake. If you have any questions with rules, mechanics, just general stuff, and we'll see what we can do to get those answered. So the clinic info, something we always cover. The purpose of these clinics is to create discussion and have some conversations around how to improve umpiring in general. Rules, mechanics, philosophies, thought processes, all that kind of stuff that goes into being a better umpire. We're not experts. We are just people that have some experience that like to hear ourselves talk. So we plan to do these every week or at least every other week on different topics throughout the course of the season, preparing umpires for the spring of 22 and summer of 22. And then as always, if there are other topics you want to hear about, something you want us to cover, feel free to email us to myself or Jake or drop those in the chat and we'll get those on the schedule. So everything starts with everything really starts about 2 days beforehand when it comes to managing the game. We all know it's a good idea to confirm with our partners time, location, arrival time, uniform color, make sure you know where you're going. And then a couple things that I feel are pretty self-explanatory, but I've experienced a lot of differences is where you're going to park. And that's very simple to address. And I would think we'd all want to park next to each other. But if we don't talk about that, we don't have that conversation, we may not end up that way. So where we're going to park, what time we're going to be there. And to me, where we park is a safety thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, the safety of your vehicle, pop flies, stuff like that. You don't want your car getting hit, breaking a windshield and spending your game check to replace your windshield. But number two, you're going to the same place. You can pregame. You make everything just easier and safer as officials. Because you're going to the same place, you're together. But once you get to the site, the first thing I do is I always go in and check in with the home coach on the field. So once I get there, I park. I might greet my partner if they're there. If I'm there early, I will just go check in with the home coach. And things that I'm going to talk about with the home coach are number of games, length of games, what time we're doing a plate reading for the first game, and if there are any extenuating circumstances, right? Like, are they doing a senior day? Are they doing anything in between games? What do I need to know as an umpire to make my job easier? You know, I always check the forecast and see what's potentially coming, especially in spring in South Dakota. We never know what's going to happen. You know, if our early forecast has us at 28 degrees at 7 o'clock, it's good to talk about that beforehand and just say, hey, coach, it's supposed to get cold tonight. Let's talk after the game about the second game. Because in South Dakota, in certain states have different rules about when you can continue a game or when you would cancel a game. And if you go in with that mindset, a professional mindset of we're discussing this to be prepared as opposed to discussing this because we want to go home early, if we take the right approach, they're going to understand that and appreciate that you're prepared for that game. I'm always going to confirm the plate meeting time with the coaches. Okay, plate meeting. Are we doing a national anthem? Are we doing introductions? Because all of that takes time and factors into what time I want to have that plate meeting. So that first pitch starts on time. And then once I get all that information from the home coach, I'm going to go talk to the visiting team coach in South Dakota, whether it's high school, amateur, Legion, whatever. because I want them to know what time to expect to be ready. Because for some reason, South Dakota is a state that, like, I've worked in 7 or 8 different states. And some states are very organized and detailed and have things planned out to the minute of when BP takes place, when IO takes place, all that stuff, and how many minutes each team gets on the field. But the amount of times where I've worked high school or a baseball game in South Dakota and our visiting team is taking in and out at the time that the play meeting is supposed to start, and they're just getting out there, astounds me. I want to make sure everything runs smooth. And if I'm there 45 minutes to game time, each coach knows, hey, they know what time they're supposed to take in and out. Perfect. We are having a play meeting at 5:50. So I expect everything to be ready to go at 5:50 when I walk out here. And I'm not this direct with them, but I do tell them, hey, we are meeting at 5:50 at the plate because we have an anthem, we have introductions, and then we want first pitch starting at 5 o'clock. If we don't go talk to the visiting team coach, they're not going to know what time the plate meeting is. These coaches aren't going to communicate with each other once they get there and check in because they've got enough stuff going on. They're trying to get their team ready to play. But I set the expectation that everybody knows what time our plate meeting is, because that sets us up to start on time, which makes everybody happy. Because everybody's frustrated when we start late. Anything else on arriving when you arrive on site, guys? Cool.
About the simple idea of having baseballs ready.
Yeah, that's a great thing to cover. Okay. Home teams providing dugouts. Can you make sure you get an appropriate amount of baseballs rubbed up and ready to go? It's another thing you continue to run into, especially when you get into summer baseball, is they give you 4 baseballs and that's it. No, that's all we have today. And I'm like, well, you got to have more than that because we're not going to make it through the 4th inning. We have 4 baseballs. So that's a great point, Larry.
That's a good point, Connor. I let them know too, if there's a shortage of baseballs, say dig into your BP and get some clean white balls. Depending on the level, sometimes we'll roll those in. One thing Russ and I have started to do, particularly for higher level games, so like later in the season, they start to get the playoffs, is we'll get there early enough to walk the yard. A lot of the stadiums that we work in Minnesota, for example, have a lot of unique features, and sometimes it's helpful. And there's been shifts and changes because of cold or weather from the year before. Take a baseball and we'll check the gaps and see if balls can get through. Coaches really appreciate, kind of paying that kind of attention. It's a lot. I wouldn't necessarily do it when I'm an hour early or 45 minutes before a high school game, but depending on the yard and depending on the type of game you're dealing with, if there's some pressure, it's a good idea to get a walk.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so we've arrived on site. We've set our standard. We know what time we're starting our plate meeting. We have to walk to the field in an appropriate amount of time that we get there 1 to 2 minutes before our plate meeting is scheduled to start. Because if these coaches work really hard to be ready to go for the plate meeting and we are late, we set a bad example. So be there a minute or 2 early, because then once they see you, they're going to start wrapping stuff up. And the earlier you're there, like, we don't want to be standing around for 5-10 minutes, obviously. But if we're there at 4:47 or we come into their view, somebody's going to see us and be like, oh, the umpires are here. We got to get ready to go. And we're setting that standard of we are going to be on time today because we show up when we're supposed to. We are prepared and ready to go when we're supposed to be there. And if they hustle and rush through stuff and we're late, we already look bad. We've already set ourselves up for failure. So be there a couple minutes early. There's a CUA clinic on our YouTube channel that covers plate meetings in depth. So we're just going to kind of hit some of the highlights of it. And then, like I said, at any point in time you have questions, jump in. But so I'm going to walk into the plate meeting, and I'm not going to let the pitcher warm up until I'm done with my plate meeting. Coaches will be like, oh, we can just go over here while they're doing and do our plate meeting while he's warming up. Well, that doesn't work for me because I haven't confirmed anything. I'm not ready to go. By the time I'm done with my plate meeting, that pitcher's ready to pitch. I haven't prepared myself to umpire yet because I've been over here working through lineups, working through ground rules and all that kind of stuff with players. I have a very systematic routine that I go through, and we'll cover that. Everybody's a little different. We've even got a little bit of a video to show, but I'm going to have a plate meeting at the plate before the pitcher gets to warm up. At that plate meeting, I'm going to introduce myself. Do standard introductions. Everybody knows that. That's pretty basic, right? I'm going to take the home lineup and confirm that first. And when I take the home lineup, I'm going to say, hey, coach, are all your players legally equipped? This year in high school baseball, we have to have the Noxay stamp on the chest protector. We have to have the Noxay stamp on the baseballs. Those are non-negotiables. And that might even be worth confirming with the coach when you meet them, when you check in. Hey, just a heads up, all your baseballs have the Noxay stamp on them. Perfect. Chest protector the same? Good. That's one less thing you have to worry about. And they may think of that and go, oh, yeah, we do have one. I'll make sure he wears it. Right? And heads that off as early as possible. Everybody's legally equipped. Awesome. I look through the lineup. I make sure numbers match. I make sure how many players we have on the lineup. And I'll confirm pitcher, DH, and catcher's first name. I know I've got all three of those. I'm happy. That's my fulfillment. I fulfilled my thing there because I want to know who your pitcher is and they're listed, who your catcher is, and make sure that your DH is listed, or we add that in before we finalize everything. Because we know that we can go from a 9 to a 10 player lineup. We can have a player DH in high school, so anybody can be a player DH. We can list a player DH. So our right fielder can be a player DH, and then, okay, well, we need a new right fielder because they keep going oppo, and our right fielder doesn't have an arm. He's got a noodle, and we want to put a new right fielder in, we can do that. And if we confirm everything, we're setting ourselves up for success down the road. We know what we're doing, and we know what to expect. I'm going to take the visitors lineup and do the same thing. Make sure I can read all the numbers, make sure I can read all the names, make sure they have last names. Some coaches will just try to hand you a lineup with just numbers on it. And as we know, by rule, we have to have last names for the batting order because that's what we go by, not jersey numbers, but last names. So I confirm legally equipped, and then I had the home coach go through the ground rules. While the home coaches go through the ground rules, I am listening and making sure that I know the ground rules and making sure they don't say something that doesn't make sense or doesn't fit within the guidelines of our rules. Coaches will try to get away with the, catch and carry. Or they play it, if they want, how they want to play the tarp, right? In some fields, we have areas where we have live ball territory behind dead ball territory. Can we throw over that? Is that allowed by rule? All that stuff that we need to know. There's one field where we have about an 8-inch gap between the foul pole and the fence, but the fence is 4 feet higher when it becomes the fence than where the foul pole sits. So if it sneaks through that gap, what do we have by rule? We have to know that, right? So we have to make sure we communicate and we work through that. If there are any issues that are going to cause problems that are ground rules, can we supersede that ground rule? There are certain instances where we might want to, right? Things like we have 3 fences and there's no clear line delineating what makes a home run. Is that impossible for us to umpire sometimes? Yes. There is a field in the state of South Dakota where it is impossible to tell where the ball hits sometimes because there is no clear line and those fences are stacked on top of each other. And there are white signs that make it easy to lose a baseball in. And whether it hit above the fence or hit the fence behind it or hit the chain link, it's hard to tell sometimes. So we might have to sit there and say, okay, we're not going to play it that way because that's impossible to umpire or because that doesn't fit within our ground rules. And then we're going to confirm length of game and run rules. So everybody's on the same page. We don't want to be, oh, we'll wait and see. We are establishing those at the plate meeting, and those are our ground rule. Those are our run rules for the game. Now, if they come up and say, okay, well, we decided on just 10 after 5, and they decide in the third inning that it's 25-0, and they're like, hey, we're good with the 15 after 3. Okay, that's fine. And both coaches agree to it. I'm not going to make a big stink about it. I'm going to say, okay, thank you, and move on. But if we establish what these are at the plate meeting, it makes it a lot easier to enforce. It doesn't catch anybody by surprise, and it doesn't make us come off as if we are trying to get out of there early because it's bad baseball, because you're going to see a lot of that. Jake, anything else on plate meeting?
Oh, I just say, kind of refer back to the discussion that we had last week. It was a really thorough discussion, I think, on what goes into a good plate meeting and things like that. So I just refer back to that. And I sent out the link to that video in the Zoom invite today. It's also on the Facebook umpires page under Corn Belt Umpire Association. And it's on our YouTube channel as well.
Awesome.
Connor, can I ask you a question quick?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Okay, so I was doing a doubleheader in Harrisburg last year, and we were going to do a 7 and a doubleheader. Second game was going to be a 5. After the game was okay at the fifth inning, the game was absolutely over, and they said they wanted to play another half inning. That way, Harrisburg could throw the ball, and they both agreed. Would you even allow that?
No.
Okay, because it ended up
He's over
biting
by
me in the
one
butt.
goal.
So the top of the 6th, Harrisburg pitches, they come back and tie it up, and we walked off the field and just got beat up by their fans. And they said, hey, they were only going to play another half an inning, and they said, well, the game's tied now. So yeah, it bit me in the ass. But I've always said, if you guys want to play one more inning, we're here to help you guys. I always thought I'd be a nice guy. What would have you said so I can prevent that from ever happening?
It's a liability issue. Do you have an established game length?
I got this one, Connor.
Okay.
Because I run.
I'll let the lawyers speak about this.
The thing that I usually say is, we agreed on a 5-inning game. That's what we got to play. If you guys want to scrimmage out here, that's fine. But if I'm out here, then that opens myself up to liability, and I can't do that. So we have a legal game. That's usually how I do it. Dan?
Same. If I'm here, you're doing it according to the contract that you created. It's a contract.
Yep.
And your liability insurance through the South Dakota Umpires Association does not cover anything beyond a legal game.
Oh,
So
Good
Yeah.
question, though.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it happens all the time. Happens all the time. So I understand where you're coming from, because they're going to put you in a position where you look like the bad guy. But if they wanted to play an extra inning, they should have said, we're going to play 6, or we're going to play 2 7s and pay you for 2 7s, because they're playing an extra half inning and they're not compensating you for that.
Yeah,
Either.
it wasn't in the contract, and what the thing was, it's just we decided at the plate meeting, and that should have been enough. You're right.
Well, doesn't that constitute a verbal contract at that point, though?
That is your contract.
Fair enough. That's all I
Well, yes.
needed to hear. Sorry to hold you guys up. That helps.
No, it's a great point, because it happens a lot. It happens a lot. All right. So once we get through the plate meeting, what do we have to worry about? Dan, did you have anything else to add on the plate meeting? Okay.
no, sir.
So what things do we have to manage in the game? There are a ton of them. These are just 5 things that are our biggest points of contention, or our biggest points of where the game slows down, and the biggest opportunities for mismanagement when it comes to the administrative duties of umpiring. Okay. First thing is catchers. You have to work with catchers. Catchers will help you manage the game. Pitchers will help you manage the game too, right? Different leagues have different rules on what the pitcher can and can't do. Time restrictions, all that kind of stuff. How many pitches they get to throw in between innings. How many of us don't pay attention to that or don't count? I would bet the majority of us on here do now because we've talked about it. And at some point, I think I've worked with everybody on here with the exception of a couple of you, but counting pitches between innings speeds your game up. Because then they know there's no excuse. They can't say, oh, well, I wasn't counting. I threw 15 warm-up pitches. Well, the more warm-up pitches they throw, the less strikes they have saved for the game. And I explain it to them like that, and they get it.
And Connor, it's a college mechanic, but I use it at every game I do. When there's two pitchers left, two pitches, I indicate to both sides. It tells the pitchers I'm paying attention. It's a mark of professionalism, and it absolutely gets things moving. It gets the batter ready to go. If the batter isn't ready, it's on you. There's no reason for them to be over there farting around getting instruction. It's time to go. We're on the clock. Obviously, we've got clock obligations at the college game, but there's no reason you can't sort of take the mindset with you into high school, into Legion, into summer stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. Substitutions, how we manage substitutions, how we record substitutions, how we communicate substitutions. So
Hey,
that
Connor,
everybody's on the same page.
I'm gonna jump in here on the substitution part here because this is a really good point because you're talking about a lot of stuff from the plate umpire standpoint, but I want to talk about the base umpire standpoint, especially with substitutions. Austin, I see your question. We'll get to that here in one sec. Last year, Mark Zalmi and I were working a college game together. We have two coaches, and we're going to leave names out, but both these coaches are notorious for utilizing their entire roster in a game. And so we had a series that day, and first game I had just went off no problem. And then the second game, they really started using a lot of substitutes. And it got to the point where I think Mark was having 3 to 5 subs a game, or excuse me, a half inning, plus with all the re-entries and stuff like that. So base umpires don't have the awareness of what's going on with your plate umpire to know that, oh, hey, there's a ton of substitutions going on right now. Maybe I should count, because by the time Mark had looked up, I'm like, hey, we got 2 left. And so he'd look at me and I just give him 2. And he'd go right away into the college mechanic. Hey, batter, you got 2 left. Or pitcher, you got 2, batter, 2 left. And that was a way that we tried to keep the game moving. So between innings for base umpires is not the time to tune out. If my golden rule of thumb is if I'm working on the bases and my plate umpire looks at me, I'm going to tell him how many pitches I have left. Just so we're all on the same page. And it helps kind of keep me in the game. It's not a time to zone off.
Yeah. Courtesy runners. Courtesy runners have to be reported and recorded 2 different manners, in a different manner than substitutions, to make sure everybody knows, because your bookkeeper has to follow along too, because when there are issues with lineups or substitutions or eligible versus ineligible players, they're the official scorekeeper. They have to have the same records you do. And then how we handle things in between innings. And they hit a couple of these things, and we'll hit more of them later on. But these are just a few of the things that I think are the most important of how we manage the game. It's not an all-inclusive list, unlike the resort that one of us is out right now. So somebody started sharing this clip online a couple of years ago, and I pulled the first part of it out. I think this is a AAA game. It's either AAA or Division I, since we have a clock in center field. I don't recognize the field. I don't really know where it came from. But we're going to watch how this crew works to start the game. So we hustle to our positions, right? Professionalism. Earning respect. Earning that professional respect. Plate umpires communicating. Right? Defensive team takes the field. We greet the catcher. We're standing, paying attention to the game, right? We're We're not meandering. We're preparing to umpire. We realize, hey, this guy can actually hit the glove. Before we get back there for more pitches, we don't want to get lit up. Because of our pre-pitch routine. Track pitches. Everybody does this a little differently. It's fairly similar to what I do, but just watch how he works through this first inning. And first time in between innings. So he's working, right? He's not just standing there. He's getting his eyes ready to track pitches. He's preparing to umpire. Works both sides of the plate. Probably works on his timing. Probably mentally calling pitches.
I'll say what I do is I let the first two pitches go by because, like Connor said, I want to make sure that they can hit the glove. I think this is probably what most people do. 3, 4, 5, and 6. I take 3 and 4 from the right-hand side. 5 and 6 I take from the left-hand side. And then 7 and 8, I'm bailing out of there. I'm getting my batter ready. Grab my brush if I need them. Grab my indicator. And then we're ready to go. So 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the pitches that I watch. I watch each pitcher. So that's what I do. I think, Dan, you do something similar, correct?
Exactly right. That's where you learned it.
I sometimes will overload my left-handed batter's side since that's my weakest side. I might go an extra one there. I'd come in on number 2 if I'm going to do that instead of wait till number 3. So I'll do 4 left-handed after it's 2, 3, 4, and 5. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'll do 5 and 6 on the other side, 6 and 7 on the other side, and then 1 down.
Watch how this guy cleans the plate. And this seems like it doesn't matter, right? Who watches us clean the plate? Everybody. But watch him, right? He's not lazy. He's not doing it with his feet. He's got his brush out. He's cleaning it. Okay. I don't know what he's doing while he's cleaning the plate. He could be talking to the catcher. It could be killing time. But a plate brush is a very efficient tool for a lot of scenarios.
Can I give some free advice, Connor?
Sure.
Notice that umpire did not touch the corners, did not touch the black. Don't leave them covered in dirt. There, that's for you, not for the batter, not for the catcher, not for anybody else to see. Leave the corners of the plate should be as covered in dirt as possible, because then you can determine where it ends.
There you go. But he's efficient. He's not lackadaisical. He's not lollygagging. He's efficient. Cleans the plate, gets out of there. Now, when that catcher comes out, I'm gonna say, "Hey, Billy, great to see you again." I may have never seen Billy before. He probably won't know that, but it just establishes that familiarity, right? He gets back there. I'm back there taking pitches. Sometimes I will have hey, no, it's been a while since you've had me. Here's what I expect. And set those expectations. And it's simple, and it's not like what I'm going to call a strike and what I'm not going to call a strike. I don't have that conversation with them. But for me, it's typically something of, all right, catch them where they throw them. Keep me clean back here. You got an issue, let me know. We'll talk through it. And if you end up, and a lot of times it's, hey, if you're the last batter, make sure somebody's out here helping you out, getting your pitcher warm for you. And that's kind of it. I keep it simple. I want to make sure that I'm not overbearing. He's concentrating. He's getting ready to play the game too, right? But there's no reason why we can't establish some expectations. Hey, if you take one, I'll ask if you're good. If you say, yeah, I'm just going to give you a baseball. I've gotten away from every time a catcher gets hit, giving them a second, walking the pitcher. walking the ball out to the pitcher, because I've had catchers that get pissed off at that. They're like, no, give me a baseball. I'm tough. You're making me look like a punk. You're making me look weak. Like I need a breather every time I take a glancing blow off the shin guard. So I just tell them like, hey, if you need a second, I'll ask. If you're good, if you say no, I'll give you all the time you need. If you say, yeah, I'm giving you a baseball. Because then they know that they control that. Because catchers are tough. They're generally tough guys. They want to look tough. They also don't want to slow things down unnecessarily.
That said, you've got an obligation, Connor, to make sure to keep an eye on him for concussion purposes. A lot of the guys that are going to tough through that, they're afraid. They don't want to confront it. And if you start seeing some imbalance when they get in their spot, call time and get somebody out there. You need to get some help. We simply can't, we don't have, liability is an issue, but I'm less concerned about that. This is our boy. This is our guy. So we want to take care of him. But I like what you're saying. Be ready to go out. Be ready to give him time. Don't assume it.
If they take a shot up the face, it's a different story. And I was getting ready to get to that. They take a shot to the head. I may not go all the way out to the pitcher, but I'm going to go out, throw a ball, clean the plate, check with them, and check in, because then I can look at him while I'm cleaning the plate and nobody knows that's what I'm doing.
Right.
I look at it this way. This is a time where you can actually use your pitcher to almost gain an ally. You might be able to walk out to the pitcher and tell him, because they're not always thinking this way. Tell him, hey, look over your shoulder. Does he look okay? I know he's tough. I get it, but does he look all right? And your pitcher will usually, he'll look over your shoulder and go, yeah, he's ready.
It's a great point that Russ makes. And yeah, when it comes to blows to the head and face, like a catcher telling me that, yeah, I'm good to go right away, and I have not gotten a baseball to the pitcher yet, that's a non-starter. I'm still gonna give him a couple seconds. I'm gonna throw that ball to the pitcher, because at the end of the day, at the college level, this guy is the only thing between me and a 92, 96 mile an hour fastball. And I want to make sure that he knows where he's at and he's got all of his bearings, because at the end of the day, as I just said, he is the only thing stopping a 96 mile an hour projectile from hitting me.
Yeah. And my point is I want all the allies I can get on the ball field. And if I can get my pitcher to think that I'm his ally, because after all, I want strikes, and so does he. So if I can get out there and make him understand that he's my ally and so is my catcher, I can just work that relationship to be better in almost every way. That's the reason I go to the pitcher every time my catcher gets hit.
Connor, can I drop something in?
Yeah.
Particularly at the high school level, and when I was working with younger catchers, as we're having that conversation, I'm asking them what kind of pitches this pitcher's got. As we're just kind of getting to know one another, I'll say, hey, if Tommy over there, your head coach, I love the guy. He's a great guy, but not during the game. I don't want to talk to him. If he has questions where it is and you want to answer, we're going to get through this a lot quicker. If you can answer for him, if it's outside. Now, of course, he could show you up. He could do something dumb, but you're trusting this kid and you're saying, we're going to work on this stuff together. I'll get everyone I can. But if you answer him, I'd appreciate it. And it absolutely stops arguments. It stops chirping about pitch calls, height outside. If the catcher says, no, Tommy, that was out. What's he going to do? Fight with his catcher? So it's a like Russ said, you're building relationships with every word comes out of your mouth. And if you can be sort of a promoter of the catcher and a promoter of the strikes that are about to come across the plate, it doesn't hurt. And I've carried it with me. I do it at the D1 level. I do it with all of them. And I actually had a coach come unglued and say, yeah, it's a seventh inning and I can't figure out your zone. Catcher looked over and said, Rob, I know what it is. And we were done. That was the end of that argument. He couldn't chirp anymore because the catcher fucking full knew what was, excuse my French. We're not recording this one because Russ is naked, right? Anyway, Russ is absolutely right. The more you can sort of trust your catcher and get communication and get your pitcher involved in that conversation, the better your game is going to go, and future games.
Yeah. So a couple things from this video outside of what we just covered. You notice that the umpire is on the fielding team's side, fielding team's dugout in front of that one, because they're coming out to the field. We can speed them up a little bit. We can encourage them to hustle. but also because if that pitcher just gave up 4 runs because he walked 2 guys, he's going to be furious. If I'm across the diamond from him and he decides to come after me, everybody knows. Whereas if I'm on his side and he gets to walk right by me, it's really easy for him to sneak something in. And it almost makes you're antagonizing the situation because you're putting yourself in a position where he's walking by and he sees you. And it's really easy for him to quietly say a couple words that nobody else hears. Whereas if you remove yourself from that situation, he doesn't even, most of the time, they're not even going to give it a second thought. They walk straight to the dugout. They're away from you. Their frustration is balls and strikes, right? With that being said, we can't chase the batter that we just rung up on a separation pitch to his dugout. So if we ring the kid up to end the inning, stand there at the point of the plate for a couple seconds, let him get to the dugout, and then move up that line. Once I know that we got 2 pitches left, and I do that every half inning for at least the first 4 innings. So I've done it for 4 innings. By that time, most of the teams are already going. I don't even have to tell them they got 2. The catcher's yelling. Everybody knows because I've set that standard and repeated myself. Now, I might do it every half inning, but typically after 4 in a 7-inning game, everybody knows. And if I need to revisit that, it doesn't look out of place. It's not like I'm hustling them along. They think I've been doing it the entire game. So I would encourage you to do it the entire game. But I've got to the point where I'm probably 10-ish feet past the edge of the dirt circle, up the line, on the line, right? And then I will take 2 steps out, tell the pitcher, hey, you got 2 left. Turn to the dugout. Hey, guys, 2 left. And then I will walk back down the line, and I've timed it to where when the catcher throws down, he clears everything. I get in there, clean the plate, get behind the dish, batter's up, we're ready to go. But it's all about how you command the game and how you run it based on the actions that you take. If you are up there, you're ready to go all the time. They're never waiting on you. You can expect that you're not waiting extended amounts of time for them because everybody else is ready to go. And baseball players are an odd breed where they know that everybody else is waiting on them. They're like, oh crap, I gotta go. I gotta hurry. Because they know the game's got to be played. So it's all these little things that add up to maintaining a consistent pace of play that aren't related to balls and strikes, safes and outs. And it's amazing how when you change how you do something to be a little bit more professional, a little bit more, we're managing the game, how much more respect you earn from coaches when you have a 50-50 call. You do everything else right. You're on top of it. You're paying attention. You're engaged throughout the entire game. That 50-50 call might not draw the coach out of the dugout. It might get an ooh, but they might not come out on you on that play anymore because they know you're engaged and you're invested and you're facilitating the game. Obviously, some coaches are still going to be the way they are. Some situations are going to have extenuating circumstances that caused them to come out on plays. But when we do things and when we work hard throughout the game, we get a little bit more respect, a little bit more grace.
I have a
Larry,
quick question. Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Dan, when you were talking about letting the catcher tell the coach if it's a ball, do you say ball? Do you say that's off? It's just outside and just loud enough for the batter and catcher to hear you, or you
I
just
do
not say anything?
I don't talk about height anymore because coaches can see that, dugouts can see that. But if it's off or if it's inside, yeah, I'll say ball, that's in, ball, that's out. And then you're giving the information to the catcher. He can disagree with you. I mean, he might even say he said it's out. But again, that communication now is between catcher and coach, and he's interrupted the coach from yelling at you. And that deflates a lot of that conversation. So, yeah, Tim Cheetah used to have a line. He said, call every pitch. You need to be heard to call every pitch, even the extreme ones, because that's our job. You just get in that rhythm. And then, you have more flow. You have more consistency when you get the pitches that are on the corners that are closer. It's in your rhythm. It's in your timing. It all comes together a little better.
You know, Mike, that's a great question that you have. And I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here because my perspective and thoughts differ just slightly from Dan's. It truly depends on the level that you're working at. You know, I would be very weary of doing a Class A VFW or Junior Legion game and doing that. Something at like the college level or, you know, high school varsity level is where I would be a lot more comfortable doing that. So I would say that it depends a lot more on the level. And, you know, part of that just comes down to coaches have we have more knowledgeable coaches the higher up we go typically. You know, you can get into the rare situation where you have a former varsity coach who's coaching his kid's 14U team who gets it. But in South Dakota, you know, 90% of the VFW and Class A teams that we have are being coached by college players that are home on summer break. And so they don't understand that, you know, why we're saying that as opposed to a varsity coach or a college coach. So I say it at certain levels, but as Dan quoted Tim Cheetah, call every pitch. That's what we're here to do. So I'll say ball, but at the lower levels, I'm not going to say, oh, that's off, because then, you know, the coach can come back and be like, well, you said that the other pitch was whatever. And so at the lower levels, especially, you're giving more ammunition to coaches to use against you because they just don't understand the whole concept of it, if that makes sense.
I'd like to introduce a different topic, if that's okay. A lot of teams, when they're warming up, when the pitcher's warming up, they bring out their entire bench to time pitches. That has got to stop. They're allowed to have their batter and their on-deck batter out there. So that's another game management thing that we have to be able to control. A lot of coaches, we've allowed it ourselves to get out of hand. And there's nothing in the rule book that says they can have any more than those two out.
Yeah. So the rule book actually states who can be out of the dugout for each team. The offense gets a maximum of 7. 2 coaches, 3 players on the bases, a batter, and an on-deck batter. And they can only be in those positions. So just because it says they can have a total of 7, and it doesn't phrase it that way, but it tells you it's just, you can have a runner on first, you can have a runner on second, you can have a runner on third, you can have a first base coach, you can have a third base coach, you can have a batter and an on-deck batter. That's it. It's very detailed, and enforce it, because I know that if I work Legion baseball and I work a tournament and you work the game before me with the team and you let everybody out and then I don't, I'm a jerk. And I will be that person who says, this is what the rule book says. This is what you're allowed to do, because it's a safety issue and it's what the rule book says. So that's another very good point, Barb, or Larry. Oh, closing out on time here, but we're going to talk a little bit more working with catchers, because catchers will help facilitate your game. As we talked a lot earlier, establishing those relationships, they really help you control pace of play. So we covered a little bit, taking warm-up pitches. What should we discuss? When we communicate with catchers, assume that everything you talk about back there is getting relayed to the coach between half innings. Take that approach. Be professional, be personable, have some fun, but understand that everything that you say can make it back to the coach, and more often than not, isn't exactly what you said. Because just like the telephone game you used to play as kids, right? where they say, oh, we start a phrase over here and figure out what it is by the time it gets to the end, it gets jumbled up. So know that whatever you say will get back to the head coach. If you say something inappropriate, if you make a comment about the coach or a player on that team or a player on the other team, it will get back to the head coach on that team. And that head coach will use that against you. So be
People only
smart.
have spoken to. That's kind of my motto.
I'm not saying you can't establish that relationship, but you have to be smart about how you do it. And you have to assume that everything you say gets back to that head coach or an assistant coach and it gets relayed to the head coach. But whatever you say may not always make it back verbatim and probably won't. It'll get shortened or misheard or mistold out of purely accident most of the time. But everything can be misconstrued. So be professional.
I should also preface this. This is after my introduction and finding out what's going on and all that stuff. This would be like during active gameplay.
Yes. Yes. So communicate professionally, communicate respectfully. I'm a big first name person, so I will find the catcher's first name. I will write it on my lineup card, and I will, hey, Jake, how you doing today? How's the
Doing
season
great,
going?
Connor.
Like things like that, perfectly okay. But just communicate effectively. Don't be stuck up, but don't be so loose that you're back there shooting the bull, talking about things that we don't need to be talking about. I worked with a partner in South Dakota a few years ago and got told by the catcher that the last guy offered to buy him beer in a lower than Legion or Junior Legion game. And I'm like, well, I definitely won't be doing that. So we're going to move on from that and not talk about that because that's not appropriate. The kid's like, okay, got it. He's like, I thought it was weird. I said, yes, I'll address it with him. But things like that, we can't have. Just like we talk about professionalism, we can talk about that all day. But be smart about what you're discussing. When can we use the catcher to communicate with other players? Catchers are your friend. I say your friend. They are your ally. It's probably the most appropriate thing. You both want the same thing. You want that pitcher to throw as many strikes as possible. Batters want the pitchers to throw strikes because then they can hit strikes. When we have issues, when we have a player who does something stupid, who maybe is a little too rough with the tag play, we have a pitcher who is borderline not coming set or gets crossed up. Things like that, we can use the catcher to address. And most of the time, the catcher will take care of it. But going back to how do we communicate, when the catcher goes into the dugout and tells the coach what you asked him to tell the pitcher, and the coach comes unglued, you have to be able to defend what you said. Because I've had that happen, where I tell the catcher, I say, hey, tell him that he needs to adjust this because by rule, that is by the letter of the law, that's a balk. And the catcher goes in, the coach comes out on fire because he thinks I'm trying to coach his player. I said, coach, that is in the rule that is a balk. It's a minor issue that I would like to correct so I don't have to call it all game. But if you don't want me addressing that rule with your player, I will call it. And we had a very frank discussion about that. And I said, okay, I'll stop telling your catcher to have your pitcher stop doing things that are illegal. And I would just start calling balks. And I did. Because that's the conversation he wanted to have. So be able to defend what you said. And a lot of that comes down to rules knowledge. But use the catcher.
with NCAA and pro rules now, every time we send the catcher out there, that would be a trip.
Mhm.
So we gotta be careful in what we. It's still okay for high school because there's no penalty for that. But if you're using the pro and or NCAA rule, then it is. And so you might want to say, let him know he's got to calm down in between innings. So,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If you're working leagues that have limits on defensive conferences, you have to be selective of how you do that. In high school, we're lucky when we can send the catcher out there and tell the pitcher to stop doing something stupid or to stop coming to a complete stop in the middle of his windup or the middle of his set. But establish that relationship with the catcher and use that catcher as an ally to help you facilitate the game. It can be, hey, that pitcher keeps coming out here. He's taking a long time to get those 5 pitches in. Will you talk to him about that for me? Yep, I got it. Perfect. That's all you got to do. And they'll take care of that. Catchers know that they have to work with umpires. They typically have an understanding that if they help make your life easier, you can call more strikes because you're safe back there. You're not worried about trying to olay a 80-mile-an-hour fastball that you don't trust the catcher to catch, so you can call it a strike when it's a separation pitch, right? Or when they set up way outside, you trust them to come back to that. If that pitcher misses that spot inside, this is all that comes into that. Discussing balls and strikes. Dan brought up a good point of he makes the catcher answer the coach, or he has the catcher answer the coach. That's great. Catchers can catchers can ask questions respectfully and unrespectfully or disrespectfully. You have to determine whether they are like, it used to be old school thought if the catcher turns around, they're trying to shove it down your throat. You missed that pitch. Kids don't have that. That's changed. I'm not going to say that they never do it disrespectfully, but somewhere along the lines, that concept of players communicating with umpires changed or failed to be taught the way it used to be taught. So when a catcher turns around and asks me something, usually the first time I just respond. Don't take it as they're trying to show you up unless that's really what they're trying to do. And there is a difference. And we'll talk about that here on bullet point 3. But, talk to them, communicate with them. Hey, I had that pitch out, or, you took that pitch away before I could decide. Or that's a really tight pitch. Give me a second look at it. Right? We're not saying we're wrong. We're not saying we disagree with our call. We're saying we recognize that that's a potential separation pitch. And sometimes it's, hey, give me a second longer to decide on that. You're pulling that pitch out of the zone. As soon as it hits your glove, stick it for me. Like all these phrases that you can communicate with and work with the catcher to help you be more consistent in calling balls and strikes. Now, when the catcher does this or this, right? Underhand catches a ball that's below the knees and they say, oh, that's close. Dude, if you're catching an underhand below the knees, I can't get that. That can't be a strike today. It's too low, right? There are all kinds of ways you can communicate with catchers, but be very basic when you're discussing balls and strikes. That way they don't say, oh, because if they turn around and tell the coach every time you miss the pitch, because you're telling them, yeah, I missed that one, you're not going to have a very good day. And then plays the plate when stuff gets weird. Slides, tag plays, force plays on like a bases loaded situation. And we're trying to throw back to first base. We might have to talk to that catcher of, well, yeah, you got taken out because your foot was still on the plate when he slid in. He made a legal slide. You stayed where you were supposed to, you stayed on the plate, and that's what caused that collision. That's why there's not interference. Or on tag plays or collision plays. We have collision plays. They're not always illegal. They're not always legal. But we have to be able to communicate with the catcher why. Right? When you have that catcher that wants to stand behind the plate to receive a throw on a tag play, and he doesn't understand why he interfered or why it wasn't interference or why it was obstruction, or he's like, the catcher screens you out because of where they're standing, because you can't get a good angle because they're doing something that catchers don't typically do. Have conversations with them. There's no way you missed that tag. I definitely got him. I worked really hard to get an angle and I didn't see a tag. I saw you miss him. Well, how do we get that play right? Okay, we can have a conversation about that. We can have a conversation of, I did, knock it off. Or we can have a conversation of, if you work this way, it'll help me out. You're not coaching them, but they're asking a question. You're telling them, this will make it easier for me to get in a great position. Because at the high school level and below, the amount of times where I see catchers try to catch the ball and put their glove on the plate, like in the middle of the plate, they're never going to be out in that scenario, regardless of how early the ball got there, because they're not tagging in before they get to the plate. And you can work with them and talk to them about that kind of stuff. And the last thing we'll cover is when the catcher's being disrespectful. When they catch a pitch and they hold it on you. Know the level you're working at and have an idea of whether that catcher is actually trying to show you up or if they're incorrectly coached. Because I've had catchers, especially below the Legion level. Well, hey, you gonna throw it back? My coach told me to hold it. Okay, well, I can't call it until you throw it back. Oh, okay. And they sit there and they go, I didn't know that. Okay, I got it. My coach just told me to hold it there. He taught me that's how you stick a pitch. Okay, cool. So you're not trying to tell me I'm wrong. You're not disagreeing with my call of the pitch. But understand the level you're working at and how things can be coached differently or incorrectly or to not what you are used to. And understand that it's going to be different. When a catcher's being disrespectful, that's when we can be very blunt and very direct. When he's turning around on you every pitch, hey, I'm not missing all of them today. I'm not that bad. It can be a, hey, you know where you caught that ball. Or it can be a, listen, if this is how it's going to be all night, we're gonna have trouble. We need to get through this game together. We got to work together to make this happen. I need you to be realistic about the strike zone. That pitch that you catch 8 inches off the plate, it's on the chalk. We can't call that. That can't be a strike. When you catch and you drag a pitch from above your head into the zone, that can't be a strike. You know that. But be very direct with them and always be defendable. Be able to defend what you said and know that when your assigner or the state association gets a phone call that says this umpire said this, that person can say, yeah, I can defend that, and then defend that to that coach. And then if we get to the point where we might need to address the coach, say, coach, if your catcher keeps arguing calls, you might have to find a new catcher. Now, that can be misconstrued as well, so be careful. You say, coach, will you help me with your catcher? He keeps trying to argue my ball strike calls. And that coach can choose to address it or use that to start an argument about balls and strikes. Or we can just go straight to a warning. Just say, Time. Jake, this is your catcher's warning for balls and strikes, or your catcher earned your team warning for balls and strikes. If you continue, you will be ejected. And use it that way, but make sure the coach knows, especially at the high school level and below, because they will more than likely take that catcher in between innings, tear them a new one, and send them back out to apologize. If we work with them and if we try. But when they're being disrespectful, we can't be conversational anymore. We have to become the parent when they become the child. And that's the best analogy I can use for it. We ran a little over. Any questions? Cool. If nobody has any questions, we will continue next week. Same time, same place, with more discussion on managing the game. Like I said, if you guys have questions, shoot me an email. Shoot Jake an email, shoot me a text, whatever you need to do, get a hold of me. Baseball season's a month away, so we gotta get excited and ready to go.
Thanks,
Thanks
Connor.
for stopping in. Yeah. Yeah,
Good job.
thanks. Have a great day. Enjoy the week and enjoy the warm weather while it's here.
Absolutely.
Well done, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Jerry. How are you?
Good. Maybe see you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jerry.